You're watching the Global Gambit, everyone. Welcome back to another episode, another conversation. This time with a new guest, someone who I'm very excited to be speaking with, Derek Davison, who is the host of the or co-host of the American Prestigious podcast and author, writer of Foreign Exchanges, a great Substack, and hopefully who is also, you can see this on Substack, and if you're joining us from Derek's, you can see that as well. So welcome. My name's Pyotr. I'm the host of Global Gambit and international relations, geopolitical economics, quite a multifaceted podcast and YouTube channel, and a bit of a background in foreign policy. But Derek, we sort of this came about over the week. And we have a few different things. I think it was going to be a mixture of US foreign policy, Europe, Ukraine, maybe a bit of Iran chucked in there as well. But I guess to kick off,
thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, absolutely. There's always a bit of a lag with these live streams. So if I speak to you, it's
no, don't worry about it.
Incredibly rude. See, I just did it again.
No. I was speaking while you were talking. You were talking first, so.
Okay. Well, there you go, guys. I wasn't being incredibly rude. No, Derek, I guess there's a lot going on at the moment. It's August, so people are sort of more offline than they will be in a couple of weeks. How do you look at everything, though? How bad are things, or you're having relative confidence in the world?
Pretty bad. No, not much confidence at all. I mean, I think Iran is we're adrift basically on Iran, and that's driving a lot of trouble in other parts of the world. So you've got gas prices up, food prices up, and that's partly due to Ukraine and Russia, of course, as well. I don't think we're in a good place because we don't have a way out of the conflicts, and this includes Ukraine, it includes Iran. These things are driving instability and pain around the world, and I don't see a clear way out of either one of them at this point. And the ramifications are only going to get worse the longer these things go.
Yeah, look, I think we've done a lot of live coverage on Iran, and a couple of weeks ago there was a real hysteria moment when it looked like sort of the two wars were going to become intertwined.
Yes.
And obviously this was going to be.
I remember it well. Yes.
So, what was the sentiment you were having about that, and especially from the US foreign policy standpoint? What were you writing about in light of that?
So yeah, I mean, there was some question as to this Ukrainian strike in the Caspian Sea. What was actually going on there? Were they striking, some arms shipment from between Iran and Russia? Were they just trying to make a demonstration to Donald Trump? And this is where I think, we could maybe talk more about this. I think a lot of what's going on in that conflict in particular has become about impressing Donald Trump, and I'm not sure that's a healthy thing for anybody to be trying to do. But I always try to take a wait and see attitude to things like that. So you have a moment, it looks like it could slide into something worse, but take a breath and see what plays out. And in that case, it doesn't seem to have led anywhere. So fortunately, we haven't seen these two conflicts merge any more than they were already merged, which there are some areas of overlap, but it hasn't become one big war, which I think was the worst case scenario.
Yeah, I think one of the considerations about all of this is, of course, Trump's obsession, desperation to distract from the war in Iran, and that means even humoring Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un is back in the light, and he's brotherly love.
We want to get the bromance going again, because that'll distract people. It's certainly, I think, part of it. Yeah.
So on that front, of course, North Korea is supporting Ukraine, Russia increasingly with the provision of arms and even personnel. So, as someone who covers as much of the globe as you do, how do you look at all these things intertwining like that? It just seems like it's a bit of a runaway at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it changes the dynamic in terms of what could reasonably be expected to happen on the North Korean front, if there is actually a meeting, a summit, and I don't know. I mean, all we have so far is Trump saying that he's gotten positive feedback from Kim. We haven't heard anything from the North Koreans about the potential of a meeting. But this is a much different situation than it was in Trump's first term. Like Kim and North Korea don't need to make nice with the United States if they don't get what they want out of it. Their leverage here because of the relationship with Russia, because it's expanded so much over the last couple of years. They're in a better situation, I think, to just not engage with the United States if they don't want to, and that's why I question. I do think a lot of it is Trump. I call it changing. He's trying to change the channel. Like it's he's a TV guy, so this has been sweeps week, and he's bored now with the Iran war, and he wants to change the channel to North Korea. I don't know if he's going to have the ability to do that. Certainly, Iran isn't going to go away, and it depends on whether the North Koreans are actually interested, and Kim is actually interested in talking to him. What you could hope to achieve from that, again, given the structure of North Korea's geopolitical position or its relationships with other countries and the other fairly major powers. I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah, so one of the things I wanted to also to get into a little bit was the war in Ukraine specifically, because
Sure.
I think that the US stance on this is pretty pretty self-explanatory at this point. Although we see rumblings of shifts occasionally, which confuses me. Obviously, if Putin is getting support from North Korea, but Trump has had enough of Putin, but he's also buttering up Kim Jong Un. This is a hell of a love triangle. Something I'm being deliberately sort of comedic. Everyone,
But it is. It's like a soap opera. I mean, it's Trump. It's Trump effect. You have to treat it on some level as because he's so transactional, and it's so much about what is his relationship with this particular individual. Like you can't get around it, unfortunately.
you can't, and so you know. I don't know. How do you look at the war in Ukraine itself? Let's start there, and then we can dive into some.
Yeah, I mean the thing that concerns me about Ukraine is that there's no talking going on right now. Like, even if it was just at the level of, kind of where we were a few months ago, the occasional, meeting, the U.S. meeting with one side, meeting with the other side, just to keep the lines open and maybe that doesn't lead anywhere, but I still think it's preferable to what's going on now, which is Russia seems to have thrown in the towel on communicating with Trump at this point. And Trump has been distracted, obviously, by Iran. And the Ukrainians are engaged in this project of long range strikes in Russia and trying to flip the narrative. But it really is about flipping the narrative. And I think the audience, to an unhealthy degree, is one guy. It's trying to get Trump to be impressed with the Ukrainians' capabilities. And it's worked, apparently. I mean, there's been reporting to this effect that Trump, has had meetings with Zelensky and talked about how impressed he is with the drone strikes and the missile strikes. Um, and there is a military logic to a lot of this, to just attacking logistical sites, attacking oil refineries. I get that part, but I think it's also maybe to an even greater degree about making Trump happy. And when you're dealing with a guy who, as we learned during the height of the Iran war, was getting daily briefings of snuff films of explosions. That was his, how people were keeping him, how people in his own administration, his aides, were keeping him on top of what was happening in the war, just showing him pictures of airstrikes or videos of airstrikes. Like, this is not a guy who's going to be thinking about deeper strategic issues or what is happening in, to Ukrainian society the longer this war goes on, or what can we be talking about in terms of trying to make even small incremental advances toward some kind of at least ceasefire, if not outright settlement.
Well, no, as someone who covers the war on a near daily basis, I can say that a ceasefire is a long way off, and a peace settlement, I wouldn't even bother.
No, absolutely.
Neither side are going to give in, and we just had another conversation with someone on the war in Iran, and unlike the war with Iran and the US, sort of the Ukrainian-Russian stalemate, if you like, is definitely a hurting one. To paraphrase what they said, they don't think the Iran stalemate is hurting, so to speak. You know, the Americans are running out of munitions, but it seems to be that this is that is more of a physical, materialistic concern than it is a humanistic one, and lives lost. Versus in Ukraine and Russia, obviously, you've got thousands of people being maimed or killed on the Ukrainian side, and an increasing amount on the Russian side as well. It's I don't really understand what's happening. Apparently, Trump has told Ukraine it had no cards, but then we look at how Ukraine is dealing with the Russians on a daily basis. You know, a lot of us expected, I think, Russia to be the power that would deal the damage to Ukraine, but the fact that they're dealing so much impact, on energy infrastructure, gas shortages in Russia, it's quite insane. What I'm interested though is where do you think the US? How can the US do more given the commander in chief? Because it seems to be that.
Well, I mean, yes. Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? I don't know. I don't trust the commander in chief. I don't trust this administration's capacity to do any kind of diplomacy. I think it's failed repeatedly with respect to Iran. It's failed in other regards because I don't think they have the capacity for it. I don't think they really care to do the nitty gritty, work of negotiations and deal making. So I don't know what else this administration could do other than maybe, again, like keeping lines of communication open. Maybe you can negotiate on piecemeal things. Like, there was this, brief flirtation with not bombing each other's energy sites, or I'm not saying that would have necessarily worked out to the Ukrainians' benefit, but things like that, prisoner exchanges, just very basic elements of interaction that could build eventually, maybe under with different sort of mediation, to something that actually has hope of a resolution.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the other thing that I think is quite interesting is obviously Trump used to be able to wield that power over the Ukrainians, but increasingly Europe has filled that gap now. They act as an intermediary between buying the arms from Washington.
Well, I think that's the change, is they've changed the character of the relationship. So it's no longer the U.S. providing arms to Ukraine. It's Europe buying arms from the U.S. and sending them to Ukraine, which Trump is much more comfortable with given his predilections.
It's all just a business for him, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, yes, basically. Like, he's a transactional president. He's a transactional person, and he likes to do deals, but he likes to do deals, that he feels like he's fleecing the other guy. So that's the other problem, is he's not comfortable with, a quid pro quo, in the sense that the other side gets something and I get something that I want. It's got to be, he gets what he wants, and maybe the other side gets something, or who cares, really.
Yeah, so I had to mute myself. There was a bit of background noise, but yeah, I think that it's transactionalism is the name of the game, and it can be useful, but it only goes thus far. And I think that the riddance of values-based foreign policy is the biggest Achilles heel of the United States, apart from also destroying the alliance network, which has made it the global hegemon of the past 80 years. So Trump's short-termism, not just in the war in Iran, but in every shape, every facet of being, is quite incredible. I mean, you cover quite a lot of different angles. So what sticks out to you the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think what sticks out right now is the repeated failures to get any progress with Iran, and it's mostly due to just an unwillingness to actually follow through on anything. Like, the memorandum of understanding fell apart mostly over questions about the Strait of Hormuz, which again I think reflects badly on the inability to write even a basic diplomatic document that is clear and lays out exactly who's supposed to do what and who's obliged to do what. But we also, there's also this like tendency, and it's happened, with Iran. It's happened with respect to, we've seen it with respect to Gaza and the Board of Peace, recent activities. um, there is this tendency to agree to things and then after the fact say, oh, well, we're not going to actually do that. So we agree to unfreeze assets. Well, we're not actually going to do that. We agree to, lift sanctions. Well, we're not actually going to do that. And I don't know what the goal is here, but there really is like, if you're going to do transactionalism, there has to be a transaction, right? I mean, like the U.S. has to give to get, and that's the part where, again, for somebody whose background is basically fleecing every small contractor he ever worked with as a developer, I'm not surprised, but it's not conducive to actually getting anything done.
Mm-mm. No, it's not. And it just beggars belief, really, the way that he will try to go around, I think, shifting from one of threatening Europe. Greenland's not been threatened for a good few weeks at this point, and maybe he's forgotten about it. Oh, no, he's just switched his attention to Cuba. All the while, the Americans continue to deplete their munition stockpiles, and that only emboldens China or makes the favorability and appeal for perhaps some kind of operation against Taiwan in the near future a problem. How do you look at the big picture if we look at the sort of strategic competition between those two?
Between the U.S. and China,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lost cause at this point. There are, from the standpoint of deterrence, if your aim is to present a front with allies in the Pacific, to convince Beijing that an invasion of Taiwan would be a mistake, even if you're maintaining strategic ambiguity about what exactly you would do there. It's clear now that the U.S. can't provide the kind of support that would, I mean, or won't. But certainly, prioritizing the Iran war over, pulling forces out of East Asia to send them to the Middle East to fight this, who knows what we're doing at this point, conflict and antagonizing as he does over and over again, and most recently with the South Koreans, kind of constantly injecting this sense of, is this alliance actually there anymore? I mean, even what he did with the South Koreans, well, I get and appreciate to some degree cutting those exercises short in the hopes of maybe generating a diplomatic opening with North Korea. To do it in the way that he did it just sends the wrong signal to U.S. partners in the region. And I think even from the South Korean perspective, with a government that wants to reopen diplomatic talks or some channels with North Korea, it's a scary thing. My frustration with U.S. China policy goes beyond Trump, though. It goes back to the Biden administration. It goes back even to the Obama administration. There are so many things that the U.S. and China should be working collaboratively on, big issues. We've introduced a new one in recent years in AI, but climate change certainly, preventing or creating systems to respond to the next pandemic, because there's going to eventually be one. All of these are areas that are of existential almost importance to human civilization, and we have decided over the course of successive administrations. There was this flirtation with the so-called pivot to Asia under Obama that never really happened, and then Trump kind of clarified things that in his first term that we were going to have a hostile relationship with China. Biden followed up with that, and then there's been a little bit of modulation in this term, only after China kind of put its foot down and demonstrated that it can control the critical minerals trade to an extent that the United States can't counter. Even so, like, I think there've been huge missed opportunities to have a more constructive relationship there, at least when it comes to these things that I think matter almost, I don't want to say more than any particular flashpoint or possible conflict, but are of huge relevance and that can only be addressed at a global level.
Do you not think that you're giving a little bit too much credit to China or the CCP? So certainly Trump is the common denominator here, but I don't think we should exactly ignore the risks posed by that institution as well.
I mean, but what is the remedy for that, right? Like the CCP is in charge of China. That is the government of China. There are these things, climate change, pandemics, AI, that have to be addressed, and they need to be addressed in a global way. You can't do it piecemeal. You can't shut China out of the conversation. You
Sure.
can't cut off the UN. Like you have to take things as they are to some extent, I think, to deal with some of these things.
Certainly. I think more the point is that there are three ways that you could talk about this. A lot of people look at the um, matter of strategic competition as one of a binary. It's either you're in conflict or you're in cooperation. And I think there's a third framing, which maybe it's just a sort of nerdy academic sort of thing, getting too fixated on terminology to try and outsmart their own colleagues, but coordination with China, because it's a looser framework, right? We're not going to cooperate with China. There's too much underlying mistrust.
Right.
I mean, I think people have forgotten the balloon episode of 2023, right? That was incredibly significant for understanding the intricate way that China operates, or doesn't. But more importantly, that we don't have a crisis comms with them. There is no red
Right.
telephone directly to Beijing between Trump, or at the time Biden, and Xi Jinping. There is no form of that, unlike in the Soviet days or the Cold War, where there was that such a method. Khrushchev and uh, whoever was at the time was, could ring each other up and have the kind of conversation.
I think that's right. Yeah. I mean, it's not a question. I'm not saying that there needs to be full scale across the board collaboration or cooperation between these two countries, but you have to find a way. And the Biden administration paid lip service to this, but it never was able to do it on terms that I think the Chinese government would accept. You have to be able to coordinate on some things, even if it's just in these very specific areas.
Yeah, but that sort of comes back to the crux of it. Then, how do you go about doing that? At the moment, Donald Trump seems more intent on doing anything to distract from Epstein files. He seems to be wanting to establish relationships with the most deplorable, unsavory characters you can think of. Not that I'm sort of vehemently supportive of everything European or so biased to Western interests, but certainly I find Western leaders more palpable than Kim Jong Un or President Xi Jinping. So one wonders just how permanent a destruction do you think this is, Derek?
It's a good question. I mean, you from Trump's perspective, I think he gravitates to people like that because A, he's sort of the same personality, and B, he finds it just easier to deal with them because there is no check on the authority of some of these leaders that he prefers to deal with. So if they talk about something, it's not couched in, well, I have to go back and get approval. I have to get Parliament, or I have to go through the checks and balances. Like they can just get things done, and he kind of wishes that was the way things, which they do to an unhealthy extent, but he kind of wishes that's the way things worked across the board in the U.S. I'm sure. Um, the long term damage, I really don't know. I'm skeptical of long term structural adjustments on the part of Europeans. I know this has been the talk, or the Mark Carney, middle powers need to start acting in their own best interests and work together. I'm skeptical of all this stuff because we lived through the first Trump term, which should have been a wake up call to Europe, should have been a wake up call to Japan and the East Asian U.S. allies, that like this is not a stable relationship anymore. The politics in the United States don't allow you to rely on that relationship to the extent that you used to be able to. And then Biden got elected, and it was like, okay, that's done. We don't have to worry about that anymore. And what happened? So I don't know. It would be I think it would be better for all concerned if these countries that have close relationships with the United States took a more realistic attitude about that relationship and started making their own decisions, doing their own foreign policy. But do I think that's actually going to happen? I'm skeptical, and we've still got 2 more years of this administration to get through before they could even potentially before it even becomes something that you could see.
I was on mute there. I was so it was so powerful what you said there, Derek. It muted my mic to give space.
That's right.
To,
I'm communicating through. Yeah.
um, but yeah, no. Essentially, what I'm saying is what I was going to say. Sorry, just blocking a rather idiotic um, commentator there trolling. Anyway, so I think what's interesting here is um, the United States has the capacity to determine a lot of things, and I think that influence on other countries' foreign policy is one of them. But I don't know. I mean, would I say that other countries don't not have their own foreign policy? I mean, look at Iran right now. Iran has threatened to target Europe, and the Europeans have been very, I think, wise in not getting involved in Trump's war of choice. So, isn't that a demonstration that there is independent foreign policy? I personally think Mark Carney's speech from World Economic Forum was one of the most important geopolitical moments of this year. I said it at the time, and it remains that way. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not like getting carried away and thinking, middle powers, we're seeing a new.
No, it paints a way forward, which I think you're right. It could be very impactful. I'm not at the point where I'm ready to say that that's happening yet, but it
I'm a
could
big
definitely
fan
be a
of
turning point.
Rouhani's, not in everything, but I think on foreign policy he is pragmatic while still values based, or what I called it principled pragmatism in an article I wrote. Alexander Stubb, the current leader of Finland, called it values based realism. So it's this idea that you have to behave as things are, not as you wish them to be,
Right.
whilst not foregoing as much as you can your principles. So I think that when it comes to the United States, I personally operate under the what do you call it uh, diagnosis that things are permanently changed now. We may get a more favorable US back with a more favorable conventional quote unquote leader, transatlanticist. No one will be as pro Europe as Biden, to quote another guest we had yesterday. But at least to them, they think. But like, I think the damage has been done. Like, I think the realization that over reliance on the United States for security, be that not just in Europe, but of course in the Middle East with Saudi Arabia and this new Mecca agreement. Like, do you agree with that, or do you think that the US can rekindle what it was before even Trump 2016?
I no, I mean I would if you asked me where things going to be right now, where things going to be in 10 years, I would say probably yes, there is a new realization on the part of these countries. Certainly in the Middle East, I think it's going to take time for that to play out. But the wake up call for the Arab Gulf states that you're hosting these huge U.S. military bases that are basically just targets apparently in when it push comes to shove, and that the U.S. isn't going to be able to defend even its facilities, let alone the rest of the countries. That's got to lead to something. Now, is the Saudi, Turkey, Pakistan arrangement going to actually endure and become a functional military alliance? I don't know. Let's give it a little time to see. So yes, I mean I do think that there are awarenesses, the awareness of the unreliability of this relationship, and you don't necessarily have to cut the U.S. off, but you can't be wholly dependent on it anymore. Is there? I'm just not. I guess I'm just pessimistic or skeptical about the ability of, and this is more applies, I think, to Europe than to the Gulf, of the ability of European leaders to delude themselves in the event that a let's say the next administration is, a sort of bog standard Democrat with, as you say, nobody will be as pro-Europe as Biden, but
But
with the
let's
same
be
general
specific then.
general leanings. Yeah.
Who's the most likely candidates right now? Is it Rubio versus Newsom in 2028?
I don't think Newsom has the juice to get through the primary. I don't know. I try not to pay too much attention to primary politics, but Newsom is such an empty suit. I think there was some clip I saw of him on the internet on social media before we started the interview, where he was asked like, "What kind of president would you be?" and he like struggled to answer it. I just don't think he's like he seems like a robot to me and constantly malfunctioning.
He's trying to please everybody and will end up pleasing
Yes.
no.
Yes, I think that's
Um,
exactly right.
I don't think he's inherently a nasty guy. Like there seems to be a very sort of just anti-Newsom sentiment amongst a lot of Americans. But I think a lot of people
I
think
think,
slimy, a little bit too
yeah,
sleazy, a
I
little
think
bit
there's a
too.
general sentiment that's against people who don't seem like they have any core principles. And every interview I see with him, he's yes-anding the interviewer in a way that often contradicts something that he said, 2 interviews ago. And it's just off-putting. I think people are tired of that kind of thing. It explains to some degree Trump even, as insincere as I think he is on just about everything. He comes off as being somebody who has at least convictions, even if you don't agree with them.
Hmm.
He doesn't come off as one of these people who's constantly searching for the focus grouped answer to a question.
But it's not just an individual's problem; it's a party's problem. Because I lived in Washington D.C. for about 5 years, so I know the U.S. policy making, political theatre, quite well. And you know, the sentiment I think amongst more progressive Americans, not like left leaning, but more traditional liberal, is all those who are internationalists, they're educated about foreign policy, understand America's role in the world, but obviously vary on domestic issues. The understanding there is that it's because you have a two-party system, and because the options between the GOP, which is either MAGA or what remains of the traditionalists, although you could argue there's a third one because the MAGAs are split in two between Trumponians and the Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson types.
Yeah,
And
there's a little divide opening up over Iran, I
yeah,
guess. Yeah,
and well, I don't think it's little anymore. I think it's very prominent. But and then on Democrats, you've got the AOC squad, which I
right.
always cringe at because they sell that. I didn't know they called themselves that, and I think it's the most cringe thing ever. And the moderate Democrats, so
Right.
well, moderate, more traditional Democrats. So like, point I'm making is not only do you have issues with who represents the government is the potential POTUS itself, but also like the parties surrounding them can't get their shit in order either.
Right.
People have had enough of Trump's foreign policy or looking forward to the midterms. But the Democrats are not exactly. I mean, they're improving a little bit. Some of the recent elections we've seen pose perhaps slight confidence, but there's no clear figurehead, is what I'm saying with the Democrats. Someone who is
No,
able
there's
to
there's no
blend
clear
both
figure, and I
sides.
think the polling has been shocking to me. Like there was that special election in Pennsylvania. Was it? I think it was Pennsylvania. Uh, uh, that where the Democrats flipped a Trump district. So I think in terms of like on the ground, like are people voting for Democrats or Republicans? That was probably the most positive sign the Democrats have had in a while, that uh, things are trending in their direction, regardless of the structural challenges to retaking control of Congress, which do exist. Um, but a lot of the issue polling has been shocking to me. I mean, given how mishandled the economy has been, the Iran war has been, there doesn't seem to be a decisive size block of the American public that thinks that the Democrats would be doing these things any better. And even by just not being, by virtue of not being the Republicans or not being Trump, you would think that people would be ready to kind of hand some things over to the Democrats to see what they could do with it. That doesn't seem to be the case, and I do think it's because there are still questions about what the Democratic Party actually stands for, and
Hmm.
and this internal debate coupled with people like Newsom, who seem to get most of the airtime and don't seem to stand for anything, I think is something the party's going to have to get over.
It's more of the Democrats to lose than it is for the Trump campaign to win again. But I guess the last question, Derek, I guess is a sort of what are you focusing on? Hopefully we can do this again, maybe on the weekend or something when more people can join us. But what do you think? What do you think is the most pressing moment at this case from the US or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, my concerns here have been mostly around lately, and it's hard to divorce like what am I focusing on, like from the perspective of what I think is most important and what I have to focus on because of work. But really, like the ancillary effects of the Iran war, I don't think we've even started to scratch the surface of how bad things could get. We've gone through a planting season now with fertilizer flows, shortchanged. So that's going to manifest when harvest season starts in the northern hemisphere and in a number of places. That's coupled with the new focus in the Russia-Ukraine war on the Black Sea and shutting down grain shipments coming out of the Black Sea, which has caused, we've seen grain prices to start rising. Like that's the kind of thing that leads to instability that you don't even necessarily connect the dots right away. But food prices start rising, shortages start happening, people go out in the streets, they want answers, they blame their governments, you get instability, you get violence, and things just spiral from there, and it can happen anywhere. That's the thing that really concerns me most, I think, in a like medium term perspective is we still haven't really seen all the fallout of this incredibly stupid war.
No, it's all coming to a head as we come back into the busier part of the last third, if you like, of the year. But lots more to talk about, and certainly we'll be back to do it with you again, Derek. I really enjoyed it. But everyone for watching, if you enjoyed it, then of course do subscribe to Derek's Substack if you haven't already. Check out mine if you're coming from Derek's side, and support us both with a like or whatever you say. I'm not entirely sure these days, but
like and subscribe. Yeah.
Like and subscribe. That's what I should be saying. I'm a natural YouTuber, you can tell. Somehow I've managed to grow to about 100, and I think we're on the verge of 150,000 subs on YouTube.
Wow,
so
that's awesome.
But you've got many on Substack. I think you've got a fantastic community.
I do. We've tried on American Prestige to get more into the YouTube. We're still in the first couple of months of it, but it would be nice to get to 150,000. That would be a nice milestone to hit.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you've got to keep plugging away as Trump keeps plugging away at undermining
definitely.
the United States reputation and in leadership. But everyone, thanks very much for watching. Take care and have a good weekend. Speak soon.
Thanks.